Everything in the Nolan Wells case comes down to 90 minutes. 3 boats left Horn Island at around 4:30 in the afternoon on the 4th of July. There are reports that Nolan Wells was still standing on that island closer to 6. If both of those things are true, then whatever happened to him happened after the people who came with him were already gone. If only one of them is true, the picture is completely different. Every argument you have seen online about this case, every theory, every accusation, every defense, traces back to that 90-minute gap. And this week, somebody stepped forward and said she was out there in it. Before I go any further, understand where this case actually stands, because almost nothing you are being told is settled. Nolan Wells went to Horn Island on the 4th of July. He did not come home. His body was recovered from the water on July 6th. 2 autopsies have been performed. Neither result has been released. The elected district attorney in Jackson County, Mississippi, has confirmed she will present the case to a grand jury. That is the list. That is all of it. Nobody has been charged, not one person. Every name circulating attached to this case belongs to a witness, a bystander, or somebody who walked into a sheriff's office and gave a statement voluntarily. I am not naming private individuals who have not been charged, and I am asking you not to name them in the comments. There is no cause of death on the record. So anybody explaining to you how Nolan Wells died on television, on TikTok, or on this channel is giving you an opinion dressed as a finding.
Tonight, the Nolan Wells investigation into the death of a shining star, Nolan Wells, has an altercation witness emerged.
Now, the witness. A woman has come forward saying she was a passenger on a boat near Horn Island that afternoon and that she saw an altercation involving Nolan Wells. Her account is narrow and it is specific. She says an argument broke out involving Nolan and several other people. She says it escalated over a dispute about a phone. She says she heard him yelling for the phone to be returned. She says the argument continued after the group reached shore, and that it turned into a physical fight involving Nolan and more than one person. She says a young woman was trying to get them to stop. She says she left because it looked like it was getting worse, and then her statement stops. She does not say who won. She does not say Nolan was hurt. She does not say he was still on the ground when she pulled away. She says anything past the point she left would be speculation, and she is not going to speculate. That ending is the most interesting thing about it. People who invent stories for attention give you the ending, because the ending is the entire reason they made it up. This one has no ending. It also has no accusation in it. She never claims he lost the fight. She never connects the fight to his death. If you sat down to build a story designed to get somebody arrested, you would not build this one. That is not proof that it is true. An honest witness can be a mistaken witness, but the shape of a statement tells you something about why it was made, and the shape of this one is not the shape of a lie. Then there is the phone. She describes the whole thing starting over a phone, and she describes hearing him shout for it back. Sit with how ordinary that detail is. Nobody inventing a dramatic story reaches for a phone dispute. And phone evidence has been one of the unanswered threads in this case from the first week. A stranger on a boat independently describing an argument about a phone is either a coincidence or it is not.
A Nolan Wells phone evidence torpedo.
2 confirmed witnesses that saw Nolan Wells on the island around 6 p.m. The Triton, as you said, left around 4:30.
What witnesses? Where? Who, what, where, why, and when?
I have not spoken publicly about this before, but I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells from a boat nearby. What I saw has stayed with me, and I believe it's important information. I have provided or intend to provide my account to the appropriate investigators because Nolan's family deserves the truth. Out of respect for the ongoing investigation, I won't speculate beyond what I personally observed. While I was on the boat near the area, I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells and several other individuals. I saw what appeared to be an argument that escalated after there was a dispute involving Nolan's phone. I heard Nolan yelling for his phone to be returned. The argument continued after the group reached shore, and I observed a physical fight involving Nolan and multiple people. I also observed a young woman telling them to stop. At that point, I left the area because the situation had appeared to be getting worse. I did not remain long enough to witness what happened afterward. Everything beyond what I personally observed would be speculation, so I cannot honestly say what occurred after I left. Then she said she messaged one of the individuals that she saw, "Hey, I just want to say I was a passenger on another boat and I saw the argument between you guys and will go to the police with this information. I also have video footage. My husband doesn't show much, but it shows the argument that was taken and how you guys were upset at Nolan because of the young lady."
That from Secret Service Sam on TikTok. Okay, how is this helping the investigation? I'm trying to make sense of so many people online making comments. Now, if this is true, if there is a witness who has a husband with her on the boat and they took a certain amount of video, it could change everything, especially if the video is time stamped. Straight out to veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney Philip Dubay joining me. He's joining us out of LA, formerly in the public defender's office. They try a ton of cases. Philip, first of all, has she turned it into police? She said she was. If she hasn't, I give her no credibility at all. Look, I want this to be true. Why? Because I want the video. I want to see the timestamp on the video. I want to see, was he still on Horn Island at 4:30 when his acquaintances on the Triton boat left? I want that video. And if she hasn't brought this forward to LE, law enforcement, then it means nothing to me. I mean, if I know a young man turns up dead in the water, and I know there's a controversy surrounding this, I mean, we know she knows that because she's gone online and posted it, then why not hand it over to police?
Agreed. And it should go to the grand jury for part of their investigation. But I got to tell you, if I were cross-examining her, should this even go to trial, the first question I'd ask her on that 4th of July, what she had been drinking. Before that video got activated, everybody would want to
put him up.
Drinking and smoking. You know how many people were partying?
Okay, man. Out? Have you lost your mind? You defend criminal cases. I bet everybody you put on the stand has either been high, drunk, or worse during the altercation. Well, every witness is not a nun, a priest, or a virgin. Everybody on Horn Island was drinking, man. What are you talking about? I don't care if she took a drink. I want the video.
You want the truth is what you want. You want the truth. And let's
and that would be the video. Yeah.
Remember, Nancy.
Okay.
Not consistent.
Brandon Tatum is joining us. So after all that, all you have to say is, was she drinking? That's your takeaway from that? Joining me is Brandon Tatum, former police officer, Tucson, now star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube, who famously has interviewed the acquaintances who all say they had nothing to do with it. Let's just put that out there. He's interviewed them extensively. I want to talk about not what you want to talk about, Brandon Tatum, which is they had nothing to do with this, because I met them and I believe them. So noted. Can we talk about a potential witness to an altercation? And she seems to suggest it was over Katie. Why? Don't know what the altercation was. Maybe it was, hey, leave her alone and get on the boat. Or leave her alone, she's my girlfriend. Or it could be anything. But if there is a witness placing Nolan seemingly in the water, I can't tell that, but having an argument with another person, a partier at Horn Island, that is significant. It could prove or disprove your friend's timeline.
Well, Nancy, I think that it's a big obstacle to climb here because I've never heard of this altercation whatsoever. Nobody that I've talked to have alluded that this altercation was real. And also Katie whom I saw her text messages, she didn't even say this altercation occurred. What I will say is that if I was an investigator in this investigation, I want to hear that. I want to be able to compare that information to other things that we may have or other witness statements. But I don't think it's significant because it doesn't show if Nolan Wells was actually killed in that altercation. She's claiming that there was an altercation between him arguing with somebody else. There was a potential fight, but that doesn't get me to how did he drown? How did he get in the water? And how did he not recover and come home to his family? So I would take that into consideration. I would compare that to the other interviews that I've done, but I don't think it's significant whatsoever. However, I would be incredibly skeptical because there's no other statements that I've heard from anybody that comes even close to an altercation with Nolan Wells and others over a girl.
Number one, he's dead shortly after an alleged altercation with another male. We think over a woman. See, in my world, I put together both circumstantial and direct evidence. Direct evidence would be, for instance, DNA or a fingerprint. Circumstantial evidence is the timing of the alleged altercation and his death. Right?
Nancy,
it's hard for me to believe that there's some kind of altercation on Horn Island just before he dies, and they were not connected. That's hard for me to believe that.
Well, Nancy, she's not saying he lost the fight. She's not saying that he got beat up. If you look at the autopsy, there's no clear signs of blunt force trauma to his face or any of the vital areas that could kill him. So it doesn't appear that there's any indication that he lost a fight, that there was enough trauma in this particular fight that would lead to his death. And when you look at the autopsy, there is no blunt force trauma to his face. There is no lacerations or damages to the back of his head. This is redness that was underneath the skin.
Oh, wait, are you looking at the screen? Because I'm looking at a big red mark on the back of his head.
Yeah, but this is underneath the skin. This is not a big red gash that's in the back of his head, which would be consistent with blunt force trauma. This is something that occurred underneath the skin that could have been from pooling of blood after his death due to,
Okay, I need to explain something.
I'll let the experts talk about specifics, but it doesn't appear that.
Okay, let's do that. But I want everyone to understand why Officer Tatum is here. Officer Tatum and Philip Dubé and others on our panel tonight are taking a particular side, right? It's called cross-examination, and it is similar to what happens in court. A theory emerges, a line of questioning emerges, and the other side tests it with fire under cross-examination. And then, hopefully, you get to the truth. Right now, we're talking about an alleged eyewitness to an altercation just before Nolan Wells is dead. If she has not handed this over to the police, it doesn't mean a hill of beans to me. But Tatum has a good idea, and that is, let's let an expert discuss it. To Joseph Scott Morgan, death investigator, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University. You can see him now on a hit podcast. It's on YouTube, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Joe Scott, if there had been not a blunt force trauma that Officer Tatum is describing, but a fist fight, if there had been a fist fight, plus body in water for multiple days, body decomposition, would you expect to see red marks on the hands at that juncture, on the face? What would you expect if there had been a fisticuffs?
Yeah, you would see, well, first off, above discolored areas, like consistent with contusions. If there are facial strikes or just body blows, you can actually see abraded areas over the surface of his fingers. And these are very subtle sometimes. And if there is decomposition, which we believe there is, particularly per the second autopsy that was performed, he didn't make note of this. And can I go one more step with this? And this is kind of graphic, but people need to understand this. This physician that did the second autopsy actually did what's referred to as a coronal sectioning of the face. So there were multiple incisions made into Nolan's face in this autopsy, this second autopsy. And this guy didn't see anything. He didn't see anything that was of import, relative or indicative of blunt force trauma. And I would think that if there was contact, particularly if he's fighting a group of people, these sorts of things, you're going to have injuries probably on the leading edges, or what we refer to as the blade of the arm, right here on the forearm, the back of the hands, the knuckles, those points of contact. And certainly if there's facial strikes going on with him, which we find with blunt force trauma many times with fisticuffs, as you say, you'll see these strikes, you'll see marks on the face. There's nothing to indicate that in the second autopsy. Now, what the state has, I don't know, but I do know this. I know they're saying they're done with the autopsy and that it's complete, which means the gross findings in the autopsy room, the tox, the histology, that means that autopsy report is complete. They just hadn't released their findings yet.
And speaking of that, Joe Scott Morgan, I've heard the same, that the autopsy is complete.
Yeah.
There are reports that there is no cocaine in Nolan's system. That's uncorroborated reports,
Okay.
but a good source. No cocaine in the system.
Yep.
Joe Scott, when the body has been in the elements, such as the water, for that long, how can I confirm if he had been drinking or not?
Oh, you can still pull a BA, blood alcohol, or blood ethanol level, as it's referred to. And again, Nancy, we're not talking about someone that has been down for weeks and weeks. We can still do the BA, and it can come from urine, blood. We can still draw urine and find it pretty effectively. You'll have what's referred to as qualitative. We've talked about this before, and I know you understand that, but so our friends understand. You have a qualitative amount, which they say, yes, it is present. And then you have a quantitative amount where they do the measurement of the BAC, the blood alcohol content. Just think about DWI, DUI, wherever you're from, those levels. And then we get up to those lethal levels. That's really what I'm interested in relative. And yeah, I'm interested in any of the other toxicological findings you might have relative to anything illicit or illicit drugs, but particularly with alcohol, because that has been kind of this thing that has been said over and over and over again. Well, let me see it. I want to know what the blood alcohol level was like. And historically, I would like to know what his level of experience has been with alcohol. As you well know, because of cases you've worked on in the past, Nancy, if you're a lightweight, if you've never had anything to drink and you start taking on copious amounts of alcohol, and you're kind of a neophyte in this area, it can have very, very lethal outcomes.
Let me understand. Joe Scott Morgan joining us, star of Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan on YouTube and Death Investigator. When I'm asking you, even if the body has been in the elements for a period of days, can I still get a blood alcohol? Maybe not from urine, but you certainly can't do a blow test. But can you take human tissue from one of the organs and extract a blood alcohol from human tissue?
It'd be very difficult. Generally, the liver is the best candidate. We'll spin that down. We'll take a section of it, spin it down, and liquefy it. But again, I submit to you, Nancy, that he has not been down long enough to compromise the ability to get at least
Get
a
a
quantitative
BA.
amount. Yeah, to get a BA.
Okay. To Philip Dubé joining me, a veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney out of the LA jurisdiction. I'm not quite sure why you're so focused on who had been drinking. Let's take a look at the video. Let me answer that for you. Everybody was drinking. Okay? Everybody had a snootful. So, even someone drinking can see an altercation, Dubé.
No, of course you can. I can see that crowd of people out there. It was a bustling, hot 4th of July afternoon. But who's to say that the people that she saw included Nolan Wells? And that's why you got to get into her ability to perceive and recollect being impacted by intoxicants such as alcohol. I would want to know if she had imbibed. I really would. Not to mention The autopsy findings thus far do not reflect any type of physical insults or injury to his body. At most, what you have
I'm
are
asking
signs.
you about your fixation on the witness having been drinking. Joe Scott Morgan has already addressed the body. I'm talking to you about the alleged witness.
Yeah. If she had in fact been drinking, I do believe, unless they really have a video showing him in HD quality, showing that he was in a fight, then I would call her ability to perceive, recollect, and even state that there was an altercation going on in her presence.
You know, Brandon Tatum joining us, Officer Tatum on YouTube. I've cross-examined a lot of witnesses, and I cross-examined them exactly on that. How far away were you? Did you know the target? Were you familiar with them? Was your vision obstructed by anything? Were you wearing glasses? Were you wearing sunglasses? What time of the day? I mean, I could go on and on and on. But unless you have a nun, a priest, or a virgin on the stand, or maybe Angel Gabriel might come down and testify, you have to take your witness as you find them. And I'm sure you've had a lot of drunk witnesses in Tucson, to everything from a bar fight to a murder to a dope deal. Look, I'd say a good 50% of witnesses were drunk at one time or the other. That doesn't mean they didn't see what they saw.
Well, from a law enforcement perspective, this is not cross-examination on the stand. This is us. What I would deal with a witness is right on the scene, and I'm not too concerned of whether the person is drunk or not. I'm not going to test their blood alcohol level on the scene. I want to know specifically, what did you see? What are the identifying markers that you have to say that this is Nolan? If the person can describe them, maybe we'll do a show up. If we have like a video or a picture or something, we could show them and say, hey, does this match the person you think that was here? Then we'll have a good
Exactly.
perspective. But there is a challenge here, because you do have to identify him. You can't just say it was a black man out there with curly hair and I think it was Nolan. You're going to have some clear identifying markers that this is Nolan, and then you have to identify the people he was fighting with and the girl. And I think this person is going to have a big challenge. I saw this text message. We reached out to the girl on her social media. She never responded to us. I don't know if she ever really sent it in to the police, but it is problematic, in my opinion, if she hasn't. If you're going to say somebody is going to spend time in jail, or you're alluding to the fact they've committed a crime, and the fact now that we know that Nolan did not survive being out there at Horn Island, and you never submitted that to law enforcement, there's a potential that's tampering with evidence. If you have evidence of a crime and you're withholding that from law enforcement, and you knowingly and intentionally are doing that, that could be very problematic for a person who claimed to be a witness.
No. Morally, it's wrong, but there is no duty under the law that you have to report yourself as a witness, that you have to volunteer information. You can stand on the side of a pool and watch somebody drown and do nothing unless you have a fiduciary capacity, and it's not a crime in our jurisprudence. So nothing is compelling her under the law to come forward. However, interesting, she did post it. She did identify herself. She did say she was going to police, and that would be my first line of cross. Did you take this to the police? And if she said no, all HELL break out in that courtroom. If you have information like this and you don't go to the police,
Nancy,
fur would fly. Fur would fly. You ever seen a dog fight? That's what I mean by that. Fur would fly. So that would be a line of cross-exam. Hold on, something else. Before I go out to Susan Hendricks, Jeff Shetler, and Ben Dobrin, now information that there is, in fact, a criminal investigation.
Hearing that somebody who has an inside source is saying the DA's office in Mississippi is now looking at the Nolan Wells case as a criminal investigation and no longer an accidental drowning. Now, we can only pray that this is true. Obviously, we can't celebrate. We can't get excited at all because I have not seen Ben Crump announce this. It is not being reported by any other major media sources, but there are rumblings.
From Sam Crouppen. All right. I would like to point out that his source is a, quote, little birdie. Little birdies are saying that an inside source says the DA's office is now looking into the Nolan Wells as a criminal investigation. I can't put that up on the stand. Susan Hendricks joining me, investigative journalist and author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. Susan, you get laughed out of court if your witness said, a little birdie told me. Number one, that's hearsay, but a little birdie?
Yeah, exactly. It makes me wonder, did that woman, those text messages about some sort of altercation, is the grand jury analyzing this as we speak? Because finally the DA came out and said, look, I can't release anything that's going on, but let it be clear, and I'm paraphrasing, that we are investigating this with a grand jury.
Susan Hendricks, you're absolutely right. She states most recently, this is the elected district attorney, my obligation and commitment is to present the grand jury with all the evidence collected in the case in order for them to reach a decision based on a thorough investigation, complete evidence presentation, the actual truth, and an understanding of the law. I'm obligated to do so in keeping with the law and the rules of the court. She goes on to state, I stand firmly on the rule of law and my ethical obligation. That is what the people of Jackson County elected me to do. I will present the grand jury with a thorough, complete, and fair investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. Now, is there a criminal investigation? According to some sources, there is. We keep hearing there is no criminal investigation. To Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter, what is the truth of it tonight?
Nancy, it hasn't been announced that there's a criminal investigation, but it just stands to reason that they are doing a full investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. At this point, we don't have a cause of death, Nancy. They have not released the reports on the autopsy that was done by the state, completed weeks ago. We don't know anything. Nothing's been released. So whether they're doing a criminal investigation or not, I think it stands to reason they are investigating to every piece of evidence they can find to determine what happened and what they can present, they being investigators, to the grand jury.
And neither of those is boring. Here is what she also says. She says her husband was recording. She says the footage does not show much, but that it shows the argument. And she says she messaged one of the people she saw that day directly, told them she had been on another boat, told them she saw it, and told them she was going to police. There are two ways to read a message like that. The human reading is that she saw something ugly, later heard a young man was dead, recognized a face, and reached out because it was eating at her. People do that constantly. The other reading is that she was letting somebody know what she was holding. You cannot separate those two from a screenshot. I cannot. Neither can anybody in your comment section telling you they can. What I can tell you is exactly what that footage would be worth if it exists, and if it is what she says it is. One thing, a timestamp. Because the fight itself proves nothing. The clock is the case. If there is video of an argument on that shoreline carrying a time on it, part of that 90-minute gap closes, and it closes in a way that either clears people or does not. Nothing else being discussed in public right now can do that. So the question is not whether she is credible, the question is whether she can be corroborated, and that is where this account is weakest, and it has nothing to do with the objection everybody fixated on. The panel discussion around her account spent most of its energy on whether she had been drinking. A defense attorney said that would be his opening move on cross-examination. He is not wrong that it is the standard move, and he answered the question honestly, but treating it as decisive is wrong. It was a holiday afternoon on a barrier island with a reported 60 or more people on it. Alcohol was in that scene. If drinking disqualified testimony, most bar fight prosecutions in this country would collapse before they started. Intoxication goes to wait. The jury hears it and decides what to do with it. The real problem is identification, and it nearly got buried. She was on a boat. There was open water between her and the shore. It was crowded. She was watching an argument between strangers she had no reason to study until it escalated. So how does she know that was Nolan Wells and not another young man on a beach full of young men? That is not a hostile question. It is the first question any investigator asks. How far out were you? What was he wearing? Was your view obstructed? Did you see his face or a silhouette? Can you pick him out of a photo array? And can you identify the other people in that fight? Because you will have to. If she can answer those cleanly, this becomes one of the most important accounts in the case. If she cannot, her honesty is irrelevant, because honest people misidentify strangers every single day. One more thing about the pushback. The argument that this altercation cannot be real because nobody else has mentioned it only works if the people who have not mentioned it are the people who would know. If she is describing something that happened after the boats pulled out, then the people who left on those boats would have no reason to know about it at all. Skepticism is the correct posture here. That particular reason for it is weaker than it sounded. Tell me in the comments where you land. Chase it or bin it. I read them. Now the part that actually cuts against the altercation, and I am not going to skip it because it points the wrong way. A forensic pathologist and death investigator laid out what a real fight leaves on a body, and it is more specific than people assume. Discoloration consistent with bruising, scraping across the surfaces of the fingers, marks along the outer edge of the forearm because that is the part you raise to block a punch. Marks on the knuckles and the backs of the hands, because those are the contact points when you throw one. Marks on the face if the face was struck. That is the pattern, and you would expect more of it, not less, if somebody was fighting several people at once. According to his reading of the second autopsy, that pattern was not documented. He notes that the physician who performed it went beyond a surface examination of the face and into the underlying tissue, which is done specifically to find injury the outside does not show. Nothing indicating blunt force injury was recorded. The mark on the back of the head was addressed the same way. The position taken is that it is discoloration under the skin rather than an open wound, and that blood settling after death can produce that appearance. If you are following this case honestly, you take that seriously. But there are 3 limits on it, and the third one is the one nobody is saying out loud. The first is the water. The body was in it for roughly 2 days in high summer, and decomposition had set in. Decomposition destroys exactly the category of finding he just described. Subtle bruising becomes unreadable early. The absence of a faint mark after 2 days in warm salt water is not the same evidence as the absence of that mark on a fresh examination. The second is that the witness never claimed he was beaten. She described a scuffle, not a beating. She did not say he went down. Most physical altercations between young men leave nothing detectable 72 hours later. The third is this. Every forensic conversation happening in public right now, on television, on this channel, in your comments, is a conversation about the second autopsy. The state's autopsy is reportedly finished. It has not been released. The entire country is arguing about a document none of us have read. On toxicology, the same expert was clear and useful. Time in the water does not close that door. A qualitative result tells you a substance was present. A quantitative result tells you how much. He says a quantitative blood alcohol figure should still be obtainable here because the body was not down long enough to rule it out, and where the usual samples are compromised, liver tissue is the standard fallback. Then he made a point I think is being missed entirely. He said he would want the person's history with alcohol, not just the number, because the same reading means 2 different things in 2 different bodies. Somebody with little drinking history who takes on a large volume fast is in a very different physical state than an experienced drinker at the identical level. That is not a comment on his character. That is pharmacology, and it matters enormously to any theory that ends with a man in the water. There were also uncorroborated reports repeated on air about what the toxicology does not contain. They were flagged as uncorroborated by the person saying them. I will flag them harder. That is an unnamed source describing a sealed document to a broadcaster. Wait for the report. Which brings me to the rumor, and to how information is actually moving in this case. The claim going around is that the district attorney's office has reclassified this from an accidental drowning to a criminal investigation. The sourcing on that claim, when you follow it back, is a person with an audience saying a little birdie told them. Watch what happens next, because it happens every time. Someone with reach says they heard something. That becomes a clip. The clip becomes a headline. Within hours, people are naming suspects in comment sections on the strength of a chain that starts with an anonymous source, quoting an anonymous source. The sensible answer was given on the same broadcast. No criminal investigation has been announced, but a full investigation into the death is obviously underway, because that is what happens when a young man dies and nobody can say why. Investigating a death and reclassifying a death are two different things, and they are being welded together online constantly. Here is the on-the-record version, and it is worth more than every rumor combined. The district attorney has said her obligation is to put all of the evidence collected in front of the grand jury so they can reach a decision based on a thorough investigation, a complete presentation, and an understanding of the law. She said she will present a thorough, complete, and fair investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. She also explained the silence, and this is the part people are misreading. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict what a prosecutor can put out during an investigation. She said the restraint exists to protect the integrity of the investigation and the grand jury proceeding, not to keep the truth from the public. You are allowed to be frustrated by that. The family is entitled to be furious about it, but that rule is not unique to this county, and it protects two things at once. It protects the case, and it protects every person who has not been charged with anything from being tried in public on partial information. Silence at this stage is not a cover-up. It is the process working the way it works whether you like it or not. Now the detail that looks small and might not be. There is a claim that an official report lists the vessel that was searched under one brand name, while accounts of that day point to a different manufacturer entirely. The comparison offered was searching a Ford when you meant to search a Chevrolet. If that happened, you did not collect weak evidence. You collected evidence from the wrong object, and you may not know it. Two things can be true. Clerical errors in official paperwork are common, and most of the time a similar sounding name got typed into a form. That is probably what this is, and I would not build a theory on it. But this is exactly the kind of line that gets very large in a courtroom 18 months later, because it does not have to prove anything. A defense attorney never has to establish that the wrong boat was searched. They only have to establish that the paperwork on this investigation is unreliable enough that a jury cannot be confident about anything stacked on top of it. That is a much lower bar, and it is one with details like this one. The counter-argument is that the boats do not matter, because there is no indication anything happened on them. The support for that is substantial. A large number of statements given to law enforcement, location data handed over voluntarily, a marine assistance call that anchors the departure timeline. And I will say plainly, voluntarily surrendering your location data is not the behavior of people trying to hide when they left. But there is a hole in it that keeps getting stepped over. Location data proves where a device was. It does not prove where a person was. The disputed question in this case is not when those boats left. Nobody is really fighting about that. The disputed question is whether Nolan Wells was still standing on that island after they did. Data showing when the boats departed answers a question nobody is asking. Now the segment I think will matter most when the report finally lands, and almost nobody is discussing it. An emergency response diving instructor walked through what the water itself testifies to. Bodies behave differently depending on how they entered it. A person who drowns generally goes down first. A body that entered the water already dead is more likely to stay up. Lean, muscular bodies sink more readily than bodies carrying more fat. That is not opinion, that is displacement. Water temperature in that area at that time was around 85 to 88 degrees, which is very warm, and warmth accelerates the bacterial activity that eventually brings a submerged body back to the surface. In water, that temperature, he puts that at roughly 2 to 3 days. Then he set it against what actually happened. Recovery came about 2 days later, close to where Nolan was last known to be, in an area with strong current running through it. He was careful not to overstate it, and so am I. He is not saying that proves a drowning. He is saying it is consistent with one at that location, and that if the autopsy says something else, then the something else is the entire story. His closing line is the cleanest sentence anybody has produced on this case. If he drowned, that is important. If he did not drown, that is more important. A body pulled out of the water that did not drown is not the same investigation. It is a different investigation with a different first question. And the last piece reframes everything you think this grand jury is for. Jackson County follows a procedure descended from the old coroner's inquest. Historically, when a death was violent, sudden, or unexplained, a panel was convened to hear testimony and determine the manner and cause of death. Mississippi folded that function into the grand jury. So this body is not only being asked whether to indict somebody, it is also being asked to help establish what happened, and its findings feed into completing the death certificate with a cause and manner of death. That changes how you should read whatever comes out of it. People are treating this as a binary. Either somebody gets charged or the case is over. That is not what this proceeding is. It can produce a determination about how Nolan Wells died without producing an indictment against anybody. Those are separate outputs from the same room. The reading offered on air is that at this stage they may not know whether they have a homicide, may not have a settled cause of death, and have deliberately combined the cause of death question and the criminal question into one proceeding so both can be resolved in one place. Then came the old line about a grand jury indicting a ham sandwich if the presenter wants it. The answer was yes, they will. And that cuts in a direction people rarely follow through on. A presenter who believes a crime occurred can generally get an indictment. A presenter who does not believe one occurred can generally get a no bill. It is a closed room with one lawyer in it. The posture of the person standing in front of that panel is not a small factor. It may be the largest one. So here is where this case actually sits tonight. There is an unverified account from a woman who says she watched an argument over a phone turn into a fight involving Nolan Wells shortly before he died, whose value rests entirely on whether she can identify who she saw and whether her footage carries a time. There is forensic commentary that the second autopsy did not document the injuries a serious fight usually leaves, weighed against 2 days in 85-degree water, against a statement that never claimed a beating, and against a state report nobody outside that office has read. There is a boat name discrepancy that is probably a typo and could still cost somebody a conviction. There is water evidence consistent with a drowning close to where he was last seen, which the autopsy will either confirm or detonate. And there is a district attorney taking this to a grand jury that may be asked to decide how he died, not just who is responsible. What there still is not, more than a month on, is an answer. Not for the public, and not for a family that has been waiting since the 6th of July to be told something they can hold. So if you know anything about where Nolan Wells was on that island after 5 o'clock that afternoon, do not post it. Do not put it in a comment. Do not put it on TikTok. Do not message a creator with it. Call the Jackson County Sheriff's Office on 228-769-3063. There is a $125,000 reward for information leading to the truth about what happened to him. Subscribe and turn notifications on, because when that grand jury returns, we will cover it the same day. And send this to whoever you have been arguing about this case with, because accurate information protects the people who had nothing to do with it just as much as it helps find anyone who did. I will see you on the next one.